Well, good morning to one and to all. So good to be with you. I just had an error message. We haven't gone live somewhere. I think that might be. On Twitch. That's right, Twitch. You miss out on our beautiful content today. We just won't worry about that. Good morning, good morning, Penny.
Morning, Morena. How are we?
Yeah, I'm tired actually, but
tired?
I've got my kids back this week, and there's activities going on, and this, that, and the other. So it's a, and I think the change of season. It's that thing because we've got a dog, a puppy, or not a puppy anymore, and I exercise the dog every day, and all of a sudden I'm noticing, shit, it's 5 o'clock and the sun's starting to go down already. So I've got less time in the day, so I'm a bit more kind of rushed around, and it's the change of season, both in my life and in the year.
Yeah, well, my husband has pins in his leg from a soccer accident, or football, as he would say, and often it aches at the change of seasons. So that's another thing that can occur.
Whereas George is young and sprightly and hasn't been to bed all night because he's been doing other stuff. So if George looks like glazed over today,
I've been marking.
How old are you?
30.
Oh, right. So you're not that young.
Nope.
Considerably younger than me, of course. Right. So what? I don't know if this is interesting for everybody else, but what do you teach?
I teach in the Media, Film and Communications department at the University of Otago.
Right. And so
this semester I'm doing a journalism course.
Right. Well, how apt. Is this lead towards are you using this as a teaching tool?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been actually. Some things have come up here and there, which has been good. Some things I didn't even think would be handy.
Like what?
Oh, just little things like how we talk when we book guests.
How to talk to people on the phone, how to book people in.
Yeah.
Put on your phone voice or your professional voice.
No, George said to me at one stage when he heard me talking to a potential interviewer, he goes, I should get you in to talk to my students about how you talk to people when you're going to get them to come on your show. Because there's an art to it, isn't there, George?
And just other teachable moments, like when we looked at the when Luxon was getting pressed about what % of your income should you spend on housing costs, and we dug into that not just in terms of statistics, but in terms of definitions around income, and sort of tried to flesh things out. I guess that was a good example for the students about how a journalist can go beyond the headline.
Right, okay. And there's often a bias against rich people. You're not allowed to be rich a lot of the time, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
But I think George has described us as what we're trying to achieve. Actually, we go a little bit beyond the headlines, and this is a news conversation. So we're able to spend 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever we want, actually delving into a topic. Like when we had the classic example is the TV, sorry, it's because my brain, not because I don't know, the TV and video film reviewer from TV3 is
Kate Roger.
I saw her on TV3 talking about the Oscars, and I think I said to her it was 1:28 they gave her to talk about it. And we spent 20 minutes with her because we could, and we did.
Another cool thing that we can do, and maybe even increasingly so in the future, is look, I did field reporting. I went to the Octagon and videoed a field.
You're the only one actually getting paid to do this as well, therefore, aren't you?
It's got tent patches on it. They've gone. They went by the Monday midday deadline. I was very surprised they did that. I don't know. Seasons are changing, as we were just saying.
Yeah.
There was no one there to talk to, even though they said they were going to continue, but in a different form, which I wondered if if that was a spiritual thing or not, that they were going to continue protesting in a different form.
Transmitting through well hats, perhaps.
Yeah. So that's the Octagon right now.
I wonder if they've also planted cannabis plants like they did in Wellington.
I hope so.
Wonder if they have. Yeah. All right. So today's show, we're going to be talking at about 11:30 with a broadcaster out of, I think he's in Southland and works for Hokanui Gold anyway, who kind of had his identity stolen online. And it's actually a really devious story that these scammers spent 12 months mirroring his Facebook page to make it look really authentic and really genuine. And then after 12 months, so it's a long game, started scamming the people that were following him. So we'll have a bit of a chat to him about that as well.
So he made an alternative Facebook page and then invited people to like it, that sort of thing.
The scammers did that. They made the alternative Facebook. Yeah. And also,
Gold.
I don't know if you've seen this yet, Penny, but Brian Edwards has come out with a bit of a, is it a cold take? Is that the opposite of a hot take?
It was like, oh, well done for keeping up with the, 2 weeks ago news.
Yeah.
It's come out of left field, which Brian Edwards is left field, you would say. But yeah, I just found it very strange and wrong. My opinion is his opinion is wrong.
So,
Pat loves it because it gives him an excuse to return to the Will Smith
cold news. Yeah.
Well, I'm still planning to talk about Bruce Willis at some stage and the fact that he's ending his career. So,
that's sad.
I dig into the cold news sometimes as well.
Okay.
But listen, let's get into it because we're going to start the conversation with a guest from stuff.co.nz. Michelle Duff has written a piece that played in the weekend that was in the online. I was going to say in the paper, but online over the weekend. Why escalating misogynistic abuse of Jacinda Ardern is a national security issue. We didn't talk about this yesterday because me and George felt like maybe we weren't the best people to offer the solo perspective on this.
Yes.
But we are lucky enough to have Michelle with us. Michelle Duff joins us. Good morning to you.
Kia ora, how are you going?
Yeah, bloody marvelous. Actually, we're doing really good.
Thanks for having me on.
No, look, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being on. I guess this is I find it an interesting conversation, and as people who watch this will know, and how George often rolls his eyes when I say this, but one of the things I like to do is kind of go, not that this is a negative about an article, but beyond the headline and beyond the content, and find out more about how that impacts and reacts and works in society as well. And I'm really keen to talk about this idea based on your article, which we're looking at right there, why escalating misogynistic abuse of Jacinda is a national security issue. But I think the right and appropriate thing to do, and the thing I want to do first of all, is just to kind of give you the floor if you want to share your perspective and your opinion based around your article around why you think this or why this is the case, and we'll go from there. So the floor is yours, Michelle.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, luckily I came prepared with my weeks of reporting into this. Look, so this is something that has been noted by everyone who's working in the disinformation space. And in fact, you don't have to be working in the disinformation space to notice that there has definitely been an increase in visible, sexist and misogynistic targeting of the Prime Minister over time. So the Disinformation Project, who work out of Te Punaha Matatini, have tracked this since August. They say this has risen exponentially across the sort of toxic spaces that they monitor, like Telegram and some of those chat spaces, but also mainstream social media like, Twitter and Facebook and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's an issue, and the problem that we're now seeing that the SIS have is that there is so much of it, and it's so vitriolic that they're not entirely certain if anyone's mobilizing to act or if it's just general kind of hideous speech.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just so frustrating, and it feels like if it's linked to August, that's when things sort of went more pear-shaped with our COVID response, I mean, and the fact that I don't think anybody's dropped the ball per se, but these variants came along that could evade the public health measures, and so we've all got COVID fatigue, including the Prime Minister, but then they've turned that around to the perceived gatekeepers, who is her, and blamed her for everything. Is that the sort of thing that you picked up through that, do you think?
Yeah, definitely the measures, the health measures that were put into place for COVID had a massive effect on that sort of disinformation spiking in the way that it did. And, for those people who create this content, having the occupation of Parliament and that kind of thing was, that was something that they enjoyed, because they consider themselves to be reporters, and they're creating content, and it's exploding all over these different channels. And, so certainly that had an impact, but the gender disinformation as well, that is something that we have, that is a real concern. And that's something that we haven't really seen in this way and the extent of it until now.
Yeah. And it's always been there, like the way that Helen Clark was talked about, and just the way that the women, and Judith Collins, I'm left as hell, but I will not engage in denigrating women because of their appearance. The thing that worries me is that, I was looking at all the stories of the, incels. If people don't know what that is, it's an involuntary celibate, which is just a notion that makes me want to punch people, which isn't very passive. But, like that guy in Toronto who used his van to kill 10 people and said it's because I'm an involuntary celibate. And there's another man, George Sidini killed 3 people in an exercise class, and his manifesto said he hated women. Elliot Rodger killed 6 people because he had a misogynic manifesto. Anders Breivik, Brenton Tarrant. These are all people that Joe Cox, that MP in the UK, who got shot by somebody with misogyny at their base. And this is where it can escalate to. And that's the thing that's so troubling to me. And it's just so cavalier, and things like a pretty communist and just a girl in a skirt on a power trip. That one just made me again want to rip things up. So it just makes me so angry. But then you're the angry woman who's ranting and, you should calm down and all that sort of stuff. And that drives me crazy. Anyway, I'm just saying things, Michelle. Respond.
And I'm nodding along with you, Penny. So yes, look, I think the thing actually that I think can be quite difficult for people to understand, a lot of people sort of come along with, but people called Jonky donkey, or but women are doing it too. So as if they're sort of like, what about what about this thing happening? What about that thing happening? And I think what's a really important thing to establish is that, yes, of course, politicians do get this, these kinds of disrespectful statements made about them, and they're open to abuse and that kind of thing. But no one hated Donald Trump because he was a man. No one attacked John Key because he was a man. There is a world of difference between a pretty communist in a skirt, to anything that's thrown in a male politician. And this is why it's really important to understand what misogyny is. Okay. Yeah. Misogyny is not, it is hatred of women. Yes. But we need to understand it more than that. It is the attempt to punish and control women for transgressing female roles and not being good women. Right. And so, we can imagine that a good woman is someone who, I don't know, is at home in the kitchen, is like a sexual object these things are designed to remind women that there is a place for them, and that place is not in public life. And so all of this misogynistic abuse, from someone like what we saw with the Jacinda Ardern's face being superimposed onto a sex worker's body on Facebook last week, something like that, where people can sort of just watch it and laugh and put a like emoji next to it or share it with their friends. That is damaging in its own right. And it's, yes, like you say, Penny, like the incel subculture and the fact that misogyny is, in all of these toxic and extremist ideologies, misogyny has a part in a lot of those. And so that is dangerous, but on its own, it's dangerous because it belittles women and it prevents them from wanting to be in public.
Well, that's it. And it goes to all levels too, like the woman in Christchurch who did such a great job. I'm sorry, you will know her name. What is her name?
Sarah Templeton.
Thank you very much. Also, my friend is the deputy mayor of Nelson, Judine Edgar, and she gets a whole lot of horrid stuff. It is at all levels. And it will discourage women from going into politics, which is the last thing that we need, because we need representation of women so that women will be reflected in legislations, etc. Like the ones we were talking about, Larissa Wall yesterday, but she's gotten such great stuff through, like those exclusion zones around abortion clinics and period poverty. And what really gets me, actually, and I've been doing a menopause podcast, and this has really come to the fore for me, that it's all based around the fact that we are the beings with our reproductive system that create life. And every aspect of that has been used against us, and we've had to fight against it. So, like, first of all, it was pregnancy. You can't work if you're pregnant. You can't go out looking pregnant. It's disgusting. Periods, you have to have shame around periods. And now it's just happening with menopause, that there's a bit of revolution with breaking down the barriers, and traditionally when menopause happens, women disappear because they're no longer fuckable anymore. So we don't want to see them in the public eye. And it drives me crazy that it's the very process that populates the planet that is then used against us. So anyway, that's something I've been thinking of lately as well.
Hey, can I jump in and ask some questions as well?
Yes.
No, you may not, Pat.
Is it okay?
This is the Penny and Michelle show. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Me and George, are we allowed to speak in this conversation? Are we okay?
We will allow it, but we might mute you.
Okay, fine. I think we will all agree it's okay to. When I say it's okay, I mean it's acceptable in society to kind of be vitriolic against politicians. You hate John Key. Yeah, and I'm not. No, that's not what I'm saying, Peter. I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't, but I think that we're allowed to have opinions and even if they're vile and abhorrent opinions against politicians. Can I just say, Michelle, before I go into this thing, you've explained a huge part of it for me already that I was looking for an answer for, which is hatred because they are women versus John Key was never hated because he was a man. Yeah. But John Key was hated by some people. So what I'm wondering as well is it sounds like a weird question, but how do we hate Jacinda Ardern without being misogynists? And I'm not saying I want to hate Jacinda Ardern or but a female public figure. If we accept that, like, is any hatred of a female public figure therefore misogyny, or does it need to be specifically because you're hating them because they're a female? Because there'll be some people, I don't know whether it's a little percentage or a big percentage, who have negative feelings around female public figures that won't be because they're a woman. It'll be for other reasons. So how do we transverse that? Because I guess I'm also wondering is how do we know what is the misogyny against a female public figure in particular and what isn't?
I think it's just if anything, if she's being attacked for anything that's to do with her gender and not a policy, then that is likely to be sexist or misogynistic.
Yeah. And there's also stuff around just assuming someone, like, as a female comedian, I know that I would walk onto the stage and a section of the audience, especially when I first started 20 years ago, would be like, oh God. So you have to prove that you're first of all not shit before they can think that you're good. Whereas a man would walk on and then just be good and they'd be like, hooray. But first of all, it'd be like, oh, women aren't funny. And which is thankfully changing. But that's, I think, the same sort of thing. First of all, they have to prove they're worthy of that title. So there's this inherent bias before they've even opened their mouths as well.
Okay. Let me just expand on this because I just want to finish the thought. So, and look, Richard, who is watching us right now, kind of echoes what you're saying, Michelle. Target the issues, right? Target the issues. So I'm to ask the question sort of again. There will be many people who target their criticism and quote unquote hatred of male public figures, not targeting the issues. If targeting female public figures, if it's not an issues part, steeps in misogyny and sexism, what is it when they target male figures and it's not based in the issues?
To be honest, I don't care. Like, I'm honestly getting to the point where if I need to explain what misogyny is to you, then why are we even having this conversation? Like, it's the same words. Jacinda Ardern during the COVID response, right? She gives a speech which people have analyzed her speeches and they that it's a great kind of crisis communication. She's clear, she's calm, she's explaining it so that a 12-year-old could understand. men listen to it and think she's being patronizing. You know, if the same words came out of a man's mouth, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same response. You know, it's the playing field is not level, and like Penny says, with being like a female comedian, and immediately you have to prove that you're funny. It's and just trying to compare and contrast and saying, oh, well, if a man experiences this, then what's that? It's
yeah.
I feel like it's just like deflecting. It's trying to derail the conversation. And yeah, you can always take it to the nth degree, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's like not all men. They did that survey when they asked 100 men what they most feared from in women. It was to be laughed at, and what women feared from men was to be killed. And that's it. If there was a long litany of stories of women who couldn't get sex that turned around and killed 10 people with a van, then okay. But there isn't any of those. The amount of femicide at the hands of disenfranchised men because they think feminism has hurt them, which is ludicrous. And it's like, when you experience privilege, equality feels like oppression. The first time I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's so true. And then to turn that around to actually kill women with, and that's where it ends up. So yeah, I'm a bit like, who gives a shit?
The distinction is that the discourse and the gendered focused attacks reinforce a power imbalance, right? They reinforce the patriarchy. I think that's the key distinction. Michelle, I was wondering, Penny brought up some of the sort of the horrific attacks that have sort of happened. I was wondering about the national security side of things from your article. What sort of things have we seen come up? I noticed someone was charged for threatening to kill Jacinda Ardern. What sort of, I guess, manifestations have we seen?
So yes, Richard Civil was last week arrested for threatening to kill Jacinda Ardern. I think that's the first sort of quite public arrest that we've had. So there, the SAS, I talked to the head of New Zealand's the Director General of the SAS, Rebecca Kitteridge, last week for this story as well. So the SAS are concentrating on trying to find people who are mobilizing to carry out a terrorist attack. So they're finding it difficult at the moment because of the sheer amount of this sort of violent and misogynistic rhetoric across, particularly in Telegram and those kind of spaces. They're finding it actually quite difficult to discern who could be, likely to act. So they're actually going to put out some public sort of indicators in the next couple of months where people can sort of tell them if they've noticed any differences in people around them. And so that's like an SAS kind of terrorist attack sort of level. And then we have, the police and sort of NetSafe and Internal Affairs a little bit who are sort of responsible for a local response, which I wouldn't say appears to be sort of overly coordinated, but yeah, they sort of work on those local level threats.
Do you think they're taking it seriously enough?
I mean, I think I didn't actually get a response from police on exactly, what is the threat level that there has to be for someone to be arrested. And is there any sort of centralized unit that's looking at this full time from, so I don't actually have an answer to that.
Right.
And that'll be something that I'll be continually looking at in this reporting.
Yeah. And just things like the culture within the police itself. Like, what is the culture of misogyny within the echelons of police, which I think has come under scrutiny before. And Alison Moore has obviously been doing great work in the Me Too space around all of the different aspects. And not just there is, she's dealt with some obviously sexual assault things around male victims and things as well. But yeah, I mean, that's at the very core, isn't it? It's like the whole level of society and how do people look at women's involvement in every level of business, etc. So
yeah, because it was like 2 decades of Islamophobia and the war on terror that totally created a blind spot in terms of intelligence gathering around anti-Islam rhetoric and how that manifested eventually in the Christchurch shootings. So yeah, it's scary to think that there would be these blind spots. I guess there's sort of a silver lining in that it's our Prime Minister under threat, and so surely that would be taken seriously. But I guess it's the more sort of low profile, the people who aren't the Prime Minister that is scary.
God,
just before I go, can I just say
we're just about to run out short of time, but I think this would be probably an appropriate time to tie that back into the national security threat that the misogyny is as well, based around what you're talking about, the threat to the Prime Minister. I mean, there was plenty more to talk about, but there's a time limit, and we've got someone else coming up at 8:30. But if you're able to tie that back into the national security, which is the kind of premise of the article, that would be good to understand as well.
Yeah, I think actually what I really want to say is that we all have a responsibility to stop this. Yes, the SAS need to be monitoring this, and so do the police. But, we all live in the same society, and this is a sliding scale. This is only possible because there is a base level of misogyny that exists.
Yep.
So, laughing at a joke, it's like laughing at a rape joke, or on a really small scale, like calling Jacinda Ardern Cindy, which is an attempt to infantilize, diminish her, treat her like she's a little doll. Those are things that we can all actually call out when we see them. And, the thing is, we don't want this, it has become normalized, and it's not normal, and it shouldn't be normal. So we all have a responsibility, I think, to try and stop that from, going any further.
Can I just say though as well?
2 cents.
Yeah, sure. Can I just add though as well? I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying about us stopping it, but if people want and need to understand it a bit further, the response of "I don't really care" is not going to necessarily help bring those people to a full understanding of what they're trying to ask questions about either. I mean, like there was other questions that I wanted to talk to you about, but I said we've run short on time. And maybe in some situations, the questions are sort of loaded and they're really just trying to put a perspective through. But then there are other people who want to understand further and enable positions to be put out there so other people can understand more clearly, who maybe aren't quite on the same page as everybody else is right now. And the response of, well, I don't actually care anymore is not helpful to those people who we want to bring on board to go, we need to stop this and understand why Cindy is not okay, for example. And especially when it was Auntie Helen and she seemed to be okay with that. And it's a learning process for everyone to get to the point. And I can see the face, Penny, that you really want to jump in on this, which you're welcome to. But everyone's at different places in this journey and everyone has to understand differently. And
I just think you're talking about, they won't listen. They don't care. They're the ones who've gone that far already. So to want to appeal to them and to describe, if somebody's calling you that.
But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about, for example, why it's not okay. But what was that?
Don't you know that in yourself, that calling her that is diminutive?
I think it's diminutive because she has said she doesn't like the word, she doesn't like being called Cindy. So she stated that publicly. So I think it is. I think that giving nicknames to public figures, unless they state like she has, is neither here nor there for a lot of situations. I mean, I lost my train of thought there, but like I'm genuinely want to understand why when you've got a prime minister who within 12 months of becoming prime minister voiced that having children was more important than the prime ministership in a public conversation, who has also said it's okay to ask me the question, why asking her the question is sexist. Because she said it's okay to ask her the question. She stated before she was a prime minister that having children was more important than the prime ministership in a public setting. It would be a natural conclusion to then say to that person, now that you are prime minister, what about children? Now, I genuinely want to ask that question, but if the response is going to be, I don't really care about that, this is where we're at. I get that, and that's fine, but it means we can't have a conversation where I can actually learn more from a genuine place.
Just to clarify, I wasn't saying that I don't care about that. I was just finding it can just be quite maddening saying this over and over again and having,
I get that.
And having the question sort of being, but what about this? But what about that? If you really want to understand what women experience on a daily basis, the microaggressions that we have to live with, and the way that we have to prove ourselves in a way that men don't, then I would suggest doing some reading and maybe following some feminists on Twitter and Facebook, or, just, I can try and educate you, but I probably can't do that in this 20-minute slot. So, I'll leave you with Penny, I think, because I feel like she's probably the best person to do that. But look, I've got to go. Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed this conversation. All right.
Thanks, Michelle.
We appreciate the time. And look, and this is what we're going to do on the show is try and expand on these things. I mean, to be honest, that question to Jacinda about children, I think is completely valid. To Jacinda, I don't necessarily think it's a valid conversation to have to a 32-year-old receptionist you're hiring. Completely inappropriate. But because Jacinda Ardern had stated having children is more important than the prime ministership, I'm going to do it as an MP because I can't do it as a prime minister. To then, within 12 months of that statement, becoming prime minister, for her, it's an appropriate conversation. Just like it would be appropriate to ask, let's say there was an 85-year-old person elected as prime minister, to ask them very early on about retirement would be appropriate, not ageist, if you didn't, and you wouldn't ask it of a 40-year-old. Because they are at a point in their life physically where they are much closer to retirement. For someone to say, I want to have children, it's more important than being the prime minister, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to then be prime minister, it's an okay question to ask.
Stuff changes. People's lives change. And I don't know. And it's like, why is it? I just don't see it. It's not relevant to her doing the job. I mean, she was away for 6 weeks. Like, she's a fucking superwoman.
I agree. And I've constantly talked about that as one of the things that's most amazing about her. It's not a criticism of her in any way, but I also think that but that's irrelevant to me about Mark Richardson as well, because she actually said in the follow-up interview to that is that it was appropriate to ask her that question. And then she pointed at him and said, but don't you ask women about that in general? But because she had spoken about it, it was appropriate. Whereas the article says in 2017, then Labour leader Jacinda Ardern was asked if she planned to have children. This was sexist. It's like, no, it's an actually that instance, it was an appropriate conversation. Asking it to a 35-year-old receptionist, it's none of your business, and it is sexist, but it's not to Jacinda, and that's what
I don't agree. So there we go.
Well, that's fine. We can agree to disagree. I think it's no different from asking an 85-year-old about retirement versus a 40-year-old. It's not ageist to do that.
Well, that's because you haven't had to put up with decades of people asking that question and then excluding you from the workforce on the basis of the answer.
Asking me what question?
Are you going to have children? Women had to quit when they got married in the 60s. They had to. So that's what it's based on. It's based on historic misogyny for centuries.
And I think what you're talking about is completely accurate and true and fair and goes across society. I think when you forget it's Jacinda Ardern, when you've had someone who has said, I am going to have children. Children to me is more important than job X. Like, forget the prime minister, if it was job X, like, more important for me to be that person is to have children. For that person employing that thing to go, now, what about the children thing? Because you'd said, like, within 12 months that having children was more important than this. Where are we now?
I mean, I don't get, who gives a fuck if she has children? You know what I mean? Like, why is it anybody's business ever? Why was she asked that in the first place? Well, so why was she asked that in the first place? Because she's a woman in politics.
No, because she did an interview with Clark Gayford and they were talking about family. It was with a sociologist. It was a public interview. Right. And they were talking about family, and she talked about kids were a very important thing to her, and she wanted to work. She wanted to be the minister of children. And
they tried to have kids, didn't they? But no one. Did they sit down with? I don't know. We might as well stop talking about it because we just don't know.
I think the context. Sorry, but I think the context is very important. If it's part of a barrage of Mark Richardson being Mark Richardson, it's pretty fucking obvious what's going on, that he's being a twat.
Yeah. Thank you, George.
I think a lot of this, and that's what I'm talking about. This is where me and George talked to before we came on here. A lot of this, but behind is this, misogynistic, or is this sexist, or is this racist, or is this any other ist? A lot of it often comes to intention. I mean, like, I can call someone a good cunt. Oh, you're a good cunt. Whereas, and that's used but then that's used in a positive, yet using the word cunt in a different thing is misogynistic. So a lot of the time, often I think it comes down to intention behind it. And I struggle personally, and this is just me, with black and whites in lots of areas where there seems to be alternatives which can fit within that and not be same. So when I want to have a conversation about misogyny and what it is in the environment. It is actually a way to educate myself and educate others. Look, this is probably a little bed bug of mine, but I used to, in the early 2000s when I was working on ZB, I used to want to get Greenpeace to come on and talk about climate change. They'd go, oh, we don't talk about the settled science anymore. And I go, the thing that sucks about that is you guys have had 20 years to get to the position you're at right now. What you're doing is denying the rest of us or other people who aren't quite where you are yet the information that you have to get to where you are. And I want people to have the information to get to where they need to be.
Yeah, but it's like how many times has Michelle answered that question? I get to the point
where I have no idea. I've never talked to her. So I have no idea.
Just because you haven't clarified it, people might be fucking sick of clarifying it to everybody else as well. I don't know. I mean, that's quite entitled to me.
Well, then when I send you an email last night that says these are the things we want to talk about, you say, I don't want to talk about that. I'm sick of talking about it. That's what you do. You don't come on a conversation where part of the thing is to talk about what is and isn't misogyny and go, no, I don't care.
She wasn't that bothered by that. I'm talking about Greenpeace specifically at that point.
Oh, well, sure. But even still.
Even though you're starting to sound like Christopher Luxon. Were you on ZB, Pat? Were you on ZB? Did you used to run an airline? I find that
let's change tracks to a much more happy conversation around identity theft. Luke Howden is a radio host at Hokanui Go. He's the breakfast host here, and he had a really interesting experience over the last, I guess, wee while. We're going to have Luke join us now and have a chat. G'day, Luke. Hi, mate.
Pat, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Do you want to jump in on the misogynistic conversation and get some thoughts thrown at you there, mate? I mean, you're welcome to if you want. No, I'm just kidding.
Mate, I'm on leave. That's far too heavy for me.
Hey, listen. Your what I read about you in the last couple of days in the ODT was that you had an experience happen to you.
Well, there I am.
There you are, and there's the story. That you yourself weren't scammed, but you had scammers get your information off your Facebook page, mirror it, so make a second Facebook page. And the thing that surprised me most of all was they then basically mirrored it for about 12 months, for a whole year. So it's a long game here.
Yeah.
And then after 12 months, they started scamming what are arguably mostly your listeners, because you're a radio host who has done that. Have I got the gist of that conversation right?
Yeah, pretty much. To be fair, even I've been trying to make sense of it the past few days. It happened so quickly. And it was a colleague of mine in Invercargill that pointed out the fact that this page had been running for over a year. And I had no idea. How often do you go and search yourself on Facebook? I do on Google often, but not Facebook.
Yeah. And were they successful in scamming people?
Well, I haven't had any reports, thankfully, but I guess that's the bit that was the most unsettling. At first, I thought, wow, how flattering. You've made it when somebody wants to rip you off and create their own page. But Pat, I'm sure you can sort of empathise with this, and Penny as well. The being on air is the day job, but the extension beyond the 6 to 9 or 6 to 10 that we do is through social media channels like Facebook, and it's such a two-way street as opposed to the one-way medium that we sort of function on in the morning. You grow a relationship with people and listeners, and there's been so many times where I forget to push that wee button at the bottom that says, would you like to communicate as the Hokanui Southland Facebook page, and I end up just talking as myself, and people get it, because they know who you are, and they appreciate the tone that you're sending. And then what I couldn't help but observe with the scammer as they were working their way through different posts and messaging people, is they were kind of mimicking my style as well. They were communicating using words such as mate and g'day and how are you. So that was a realization that these guys are real people and they're switched on and they know what they're doing. So no, I haven't had reports that anybody has been scammed.
Sorry, do you know where they were?
That's the scary part, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know where they were in the world?
No idea who they were or what even they were trying to achieve. I mean, obviously they were trying to get people's bank details, but the way they were doing it is jumping on posts which are quite popular on the page, chances to win, and saying, hey, you've won the prize. Doesn't matter it was over a year ago.
Wow.
People live busy lives, so when they click on their notifications and there's a message from me saying you've won a prize, they go, oh, sweet, that looks legit. Oh, he wants my credit card details. Maybe I'll chuck that in there as well.
I mean, that would be a very silly thing to do, though, wouldn't it? Reply with your credit card to a message on Facebook.
In this day and age, you'd think so. But as I say, when you're living such busy lives and there's so much going on in the world and you're receiving a message from somebody that you've come to know and trust, I mean, perhaps you just get caught in a weak moment. And that, as I say, that's the scary part, is feeling like, I'm responsible for someone or something that's completely out of my control.
The thing that's also fascinating to me about it is it seems to be a new way of scamming. I mean, I don't know, if people don't know who Mark Rober is, go have a look at Mark Rober on YouTube, and he works with a scam cracker. They do some YouTube kind of catching the scammers. And if you watch those videos, they educate you as to how the international scammers, often based in India, work. And it's basically they send out like 2 million messages to try and get 200 responses. Yeah. To try and get 2 people to give them their, so it's about the size of it. To spend a year on a Facebook page doing what they did with you, it just seems to be a massive commitment. And I wonder if this is a new wave and a new way of people getting scammed. So people should take this as a warning to themselves. But also, the reason they go from 2 million to 200 to 2, it's pure the number of people that they send it out to. They're able to get, $1,000 out of these 2 people. Whereas to do it the way they're doing it with what happened with you, they have to be assured that they're going to get a much better return for that, because they're committing a lot of time to it.
Well, apparently so. The actual execution, I was surprised at how quickly that unfolded. So the page itself must have been brewing for goodness knows how many months, collecting pictures, looking legit. But then the actual attack was in the space of a couple of hours. So it was almost a hybrid of what you're saying, Pat. It was this legwork to game day, and then on game day they struck with frequency. If you've ever worked in radio phone sales, it's something like that. You make 50 calls and you might get 1 bite. I guess that's what they were after.
Right. Wow. So okay. So they did that massive amount of call outs, but they just did it and they set up for a year. Then they went bam, 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 and trying to get responses quickly. Then
So it almost feels like
what surprised me. Oh, sorry.
No, it was like it would be someone local, but then they're usually based overseas. But I don't know, it just is so. But sorry, what surprises you?
Well, the thing that surprised me the most, Penny, is so this particular page. I had half a dozen phone calls and many messages in the space of 10 minutes. So at first, I was up on the roof cleaning gutters. So I could feel the vibration in my back pocket, and I thought, no, that can wait. It'll just be mum wanting to know about the new baby. But then when it keeps going, you think, oh, this could be serious. And then you sort of cotton on to what's happening. But the thing that surprised me is this page, right? Myself, colleagues in Invercargill, listeners that cotton on to the fact it wasn't legit, you hit the wee report button and you assume that the page instantly gets taken down, reviewed. If it's legit, it goes back up. If it doesn't, it goes away. That's not how it works. We're thankful that we're part of this bigger company, NZME, and we have a contact with Facebook, so we were able to get it taken down with a direct link in the space of 12 hours. But it's a manual process. I was told it can take days for a page to come down, and all that time they can continue doing what they're doing.
You can be on the other side of that, which I have been, where I have had things frozen for because I've said this before on here, I said chink in the armor. And because of that, I got banned for 24 hours and stuff like that. So it's good that you had a contact, because it can take a long time on either way. And now that I know that, I might try and get to be employed by NZME so I can get in touch with.
Penny, I know someone at Facebook, Penny. I've got a contact there, mate. You can.
Oh, that is good to know. That is good to know.
It's who you know, isn't it, Pat?
Yeah, it is indeed.
Are you based in Gore? To ask. Are you in Gore?
That's right. Yeah, beautiful day outside.
You know what? Gore gets shit. It does get shit. Obviously, that whole Havoc and Newsboy thing still is out there. But I've done quite a few shows at the Gore Little Theatre, and I've even done a show in Waikaya. And it's just bloody beautiful. Around there, it is so beautiful, that rolling greenery and stuff. So hello to Gore, and I love it down there.
Listen, while we've got a good
brought me
Southern
back,
man
to be
on,
fair, team.
Sorry?
What were we saying there, Luke?
Oh, I took a wee sabbatical for over a year, and we decided, all right, maybe the family journey is the one we want to take. Where do we want to go? And it was a combination of getting a phone call to come back to this job and just realizing that, yeah, everything's better in the south. The beer tastes better in the south. But it's such a cool way of life down here that why would you be anywhere else?
Well, I mean, I like being in Auckland, but it is beautiful. I like to visit.
Let me ask you this question, Luke. It's completely off topic, but it's relative to particularly you and I. Penny, you can participate if you choose. Well, I don't know. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But information coming out yesterday talking about Omicron, that southern cases are now the highest in the country. Where and I noticed that in Invercargill Way, it's like 2/3 of what Dunedin's cases are during the day. In Southland, how are the locals talking about dealing with the Omicron outbreak, especially now that those of us kind of south of Waimaru are the worst proportionally hit in the country at the moment? Any thoughts?
I feel like there's a sense of we're just getting on with it, but the effects are being felt, particularly down the main street. I mean, small business is the heart of our community here, and it's just so sad. You take a drive down Main Street today, and half the parks will be filled. Shops will be empty, and it's for a myriad of different reasons. And this is the top of mind conversation I'm finding with everybody I'm talking to, is that they're either at home serving the isolation sentence, or perhaps you've got a flight next week that you need to catch and you can't afford to be COVID positive before that. So I'm going to lie low. I've got some sort of kids commitment that I've got to get to. In my case, for instance, 2 weeks ago, we welcomed our wee daughter into the world. If I tested positive going into the hospital, I wasn't going to be allowed in the operating theatre for the birth of my first daughter. So, that was my reason for living a hermit life. So I think there's a lot of personal reasons why everybody's laying low, but you are seeing it unfold, and it does strike a blow to small areas such as ours. Yeah.
Congratulations. That was great to hear. And that was part of the story, was about the scammers using your baby photos as a way of sort of, I guess, making it look even more genuine that it was you sharing your own thing. So that sucks. Congratulations. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for telling us your experiences. I know, and one of the reasons I didn't want to talk about this was I think that I was really surprised at the commitment these scammers gave to scamming your audience. And it's good to put it out there to let people know that this kind of thing could be a new way of scamming. So don't give your bank details, don't give your credit card details to even people you think you know on Facebook, because it could be someone who's mirrored a site for 12 months to try and do it. Yes, Penny, sorry.
I just want to ask, was this your personal page or the Hokanui, or some, which page was it?
It was branded a personal page, but they attacked the station page. So that's what I mean. Maybe I've got to take a learning from this too. Whereas anytime I'm corresponding on our station page, I need to make sure that I am coming up as the station, because you get lazy and you end up commenting as yourself from time to time, and people know who you are. So yeah.
Yeah, because I get message requests. They usually seem to target older ladies, in my experience. Like my aunts and my mother, I get friend requests from them cloning their account and pretending to be them. So I feel like it's all part of the same sort of thing. We're trying to hook into people they think and then go from there. So
Hey Luke, thanks for joining us. Before we leave, it's currently 11:49. I think because you've got such a fantastic radio voice, I think you should give us a sound check. Like it's 11 minutes to the top of the hour, because that's obviously what we want to hear from you. It's 11. How would you? It's 11:50. It's just turned 11:50. How would you announce it on Hokanui Gold?
10 to 12 on Hokanui. We dropped the gold, although we have been celebrating it this week, Pat. Yesterday, 28 years since we flicked the switch on Hokanui Gold with Jamie Mackay and Lee Piper. So it's a pretty big week for us.
Very cool.
I have been interviewed on Hokanui Gold, so hooray.
Now Hokanui. Hey, Luke, thanks for joining us, mate. Do appreciate your time.
Yeah. Oh, no.
All right. Excellent. Penny, just some comments that have come in this of the scammers. Kim says they are so clever and they understand the psychological tricks. My aunt rang me on the way to the bank about to transfer money to an international bank account before wondering if it was legit.
Oh, it makes me so angry that they target older people too. Like, just makes me furious that people that are trusting and of it's, it must be real. Oh, I'm glad she rang.
There are some. I'll just bring it up. If you look on, you know how sometimes you get rabbit holes, rabbit warrens on YouTube. You go down. There are lots of ones. This guy here. Let me bring it up. This guy here is particularly good at catching scammers.
Today we are.
He retro hacks them. So he hacks back into the scammers and he puts on an old lady's voice. You ready for this?
Yeah.
You'll be impressed with this old lady's voice. He puts it on to talk to them. Here we go.
I just sent something from UPS to California.
How much money did you send?
They actually gave me on my husband's account $100,000. It was a $1,000 refund, but they also
$1,000 refund, 100,000.
Yes, because they've been clearing.
So he's one of my faves, and I watch him occasionally. And he does it as this old lady's voice. He's called Scammer Payback. So if you want to see it, and he actually breaks into their computers whilst talking to them, and then does things like this. So he's found that picture of the call center on the call center's computer, and he uploads it while he's talking to them, and shows them a picture of themselves, and does all sorts of cool stuff like that. And the reason he puts on the old lady's voice is, as you're saying, Penny, so often it's elderly women in particular who seem to be targeted. So if you want to check it out for yourself, what did I say? Scammer Payback is that channel, and it's really interesting.
My friend Nick Ward, television writer Nick, he often just strings them like with emails. He'll email back, and then he's posted these quite hilarious lists. And you can tell these people, they're playing along. They think they've got someone at first, and then they suddenly realize that he's fucking with them. So that's been quite entertaining as well. I just can't be bothered wasting my time with them.
I'm about the same. I've been sitting at someone's been finding out a colleague of mine who I was sitting at a table with, talking about ready to buy Bitcoin, and they'd pick them up and then they'd just put them on hold and leave them hanging on the phone while we were doing our meeting. And then they'd pick them up 20 minutes. They go, look, I've just got to feel, I'll be back. And then I'm just like, I just hang up. I don't get many of them actually, but I just hang up when I do, because it's no point.
I used to get more. It stopped actually. As soon as I saw it was an Australian number, usually it was a scammer. Though then I reduced something once that was useful. But yeah,
I got a huge number of fake Facebook requests, and you knew they were fake because they were always a scantily clad woman targeting me. Yeah. And if you ever looked at the page, there'd be like a blue link to another site. Obviously, they're saying, "Come in, this is the real site." And so I just started blocking them and reporting them. And I probably did that for 6 months. Maybe I had 100 of them in 6 months. There was a lot. And the thing because I'd report them and I'd say it's a fake account, which it obviously was. Every single time Facebook came back and said it doesn't breach our standards and conditions. Every single time. But I don't know whether the blocking of it, maybe there's like a data camp somewhere in some part of the world. But because I kept blocking them, I don't know whether that gave them information that I wasn't a target anymore. I haven't had one maybe I've had one or two in the last 6 months, but for a while I was getting a lot of them, and now hardly any at all.
Targeting me, and obviously.
Yeah, well, and then when Facebook kept coming back to me saying this doesn't breach our community standards, I then kind of just stopped reporting them, because what's the point? It's like this is a fake account set up to scam people without question. And if you're going to do nothing about it, Facebook, then I'm not going to waste time reporting it.
Such a behemoth of trying to I've still got these warnings on my account, and it drives me crazy, because if I do one more thing, they might ban me for a week. And it's like they're perfectly happy to take my money, but so that
was one of I know someone who was one of the original sort of programmers at Facebook. Like, he was on the original team back within like 12 to 18 months of it starting up. And so I got a contact through him. He's not working there anymore, but through him to someone who was at Facebook. And I had a problem through the fucking last election that they wouldn't let me post political stuff, because they put a whole bunch of new conditions around, you had to be approved. And if it's political, because they went from, 2 elections ago in America being the source of fake news to locking down to make sure nothing was fake news. So you had to be approved, and their approval system for me fucked up. And so even though I tried it, they wouldn't approve me. So I spent I was going to say 2 years, but maybe 18 months trying to get approved. And it went right through the New Zealand election, right through the American election. I couldn't post anything political whilst I was doing a podcast talking about political stuff. I wasn't able to boost anything. Sorry. I could post it, but I couldn't boost it, which is important.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But eventually it got sorted out.
Yeah. If I couldn't boost it in Austin, it would be a very bad time.
Yeah. So I have a direct contact to someone who sits in the building in whatever it's called, Silicon Valley. If he's still there, I haven't talked to him for 6 months because I haven't had a problem.
Can I just say the delay before was quite interesting?
Say again?
The delay that we just had talking to Luke.
Yeah.
I found that quite interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Hey, just a couple of texts and stuff that have been coming through. When we talked about, the Prime Minister giving out information and being told, what was the word that was used? That she's, I don't know. It was like saying that she was rather being opinionated rather than giving out the facts. I can't remember the word that was exactly used.
Oh.
Someone says the response, if it was a man, that'd be accused of mansplaining. Just to put that out there for some people who have been agreed. Also, Kim, when we were talking about that earlier, says that agrees with everything you say, Penny. So we put it out there. And Richard says we need to settle down, team.
That's the thing. And as soon as you get agitated about the fact that we've had centuries of, do you know what a cure for menopause used to be a clitorectomy.
Oh,
like how many fucking male things did they go, I know, let's chop off his dick and see if that works. You know what I mean? So you get angry and then you get accused of being the angry and to settle down. Doesn't sit well.
I think that was Richard saying that we were getting heightened in the conversation, but I think it's fantastic. I'm a person who genuinely wants to understand why. And I guess my weakness, and I'll be honest with this, is to be, and I'm not saying this has happened today, but to be told just because it doesn't really help me understand. I'm not saying that's happened today. I'm just saying in general, that's the answer.
When women start driving into groups of men because they can't get laid, you know what I mean? Like it's like such clear, like I looked up actually like how many far left murders and stuff have there been? And I think there's been one in the last 25 years in America. There's been more far right killings in America than they have been through, Islamic terrorism and stuff like that. Of course. Yeah. And yet that was the focus for so long. But it's true, people were caught looking the other way. Anjan Rahman's talked about this at length, about the fact that they were alerting people to the far right stuff. And now it's good to see it's been taken seriously. But police, for example, and this was in Australia, but when there's a woman who was killed and her 3 children burnt alive by their husband, and the policeman came out and said, we have to figure out if it's domestic violence or if a man's been driven too far and reacted. It's like when you get police, and we still have things like that in New Zealand too, saying shit like that, then I don't really care about definitions either.
The guy who was just convicted of a threat against the Prime Minister, a death threat. And look, the difficulty I find with these kinds of conversations is people are going to hear my questions thinking that I am trying to look for loopholes to be able to be misogynist or whatever. It's not. It's like what I want to know in the data is, how many death threats are there to any politician? What are they credible? What's happened in this one to make it more? And where does it come from? Is this death threat misogyny? Is it a deranged human being? Is this a person with history of death threats to anyone in public? Or is it because, and Michelle was beautiful with this, I mean beautiful as in she made it clear for me easily.
How misogynistic of you. Yeah.
Is when she said, hey, and now look, I know this is the definition, but when someone says something to me sometimes, part of it is my dyslexia, it drops. And that idea of being hated because of being a woman.
Yeah.
Now that's incredibly clear. But then that also means we don't need to, but to be 100% accurate, we need to have the intention. Is that billboard being held up by the person who hates quote unquote Cindy, and I'm using those words not because is it because they hate her as a woman? Or is it because they hate the fucking vaccine mandates that have just been put in? How do we know whether it's misogyny or not? Or
it's both, right? It's like, I hate this, and it's because the woman's in charge. That's why I hate this.
But if it was the same rule, if it was the same rules, if it was the same breakdown under a male leader and they held that sign up, it then wouldn't be misogyny.
It depends. But if the sign says something, or someone says she's just a girl in a skirt on a power trip, or she's just a pretty.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And so it's nothing's, things aren't black and white. Things are intersectional always.
No one's saying if you criticize Cindy, you're a misogynist.
It just depends how you do it. And
what does the hypothetical sign say, Pat?
Yeah, there you go.
What does the sign say?
I don't know. It's a sign about the vaccine. It says Cindy. It says Cindy is a cunt.
Well, yes. Then if you say no vaccine mandates, fine.
That's
but if
not
you
gendered,
say, if you say Cindy made us do this because she thinks that blah blah blah, then that's different.
The argument is that gendered language reinforces patriarchy.
Yeah.
I get that, but I think
you are clasping at things. Sorry to interrupt you, but and also you are someone who knows when you're being misogynistic. You know that, right? You know that. So it feels like you're trying to clasp like some sort of excuse for people that don't care and don't want to know.
No. Because I go back to that question that Jacinda Ardern was asked about babies. That's misogynistic, but I think it's valid. So I don't know. I wouldn't know in that situation. If she was sitting opposite me in that moment and I'd said, last year you talked about how having children was so important. Where are you at with that right now? Now, according to the article, well, because it's a little bit like, now this is a bit of a tangent. It's a little bit like celebrities who put their kids in front of a camera in Women's Day, or their marriage in front of a camera, and then they get divorced and they go, well, I want privacy. I want privacy for this, but it's none of anyone's business. It's like on some level, but on some level, I agree with that. But I also go, you've chosen to invite the public into your life with this aspect, and it makes natural sense that they now want to know more about it.
People want to share happiness and they don't like to share despair. Also, often these people have things foisted on them. Like you have to sign things when you do movies, right? To say you'll do publicity. That's what I hate about as an actor. You do this job, you go to this place, things point at you, you put makeup on, you pretend to be something else, and then suddenly you're supposed to let everybody into your life to promote the film. So, that's such a double-edged sword too. Like people shouldn't have to do that to sell their movies, but generally they do. But also, it's painful. I can see why you don't want to share that. Weddings are happy. Babies are happy. Divorce is not generally happy. Sometimes, for a baby, for me, would be terrifying. Fuck, no thank you. They like it. So, I get that. And just because you're somebody in the public eye does not mean that you are public property. And people... things to you and say things to you. People say to me all the time when I get off stage, oh, I thought you were taller. You're skinnier than I thought you were. Just stuff like that. And you're like, you wouldn't say this to somebody walking down the street.
So just to answer your question before we do the last thing for today, and we'll do it more quickly than we were going to with Brian Edwards. I think I do. Obviously, I do know when I'm being misogynistic, but I guess what I'm now interested in the conversation, not today, right now, is that if I offer an opinion of critique or criticism around a human being not because of their sex, many in society will see it as misogynistic, even though it's not.
I think that's not giving people credit for nuance. Everything is nuance.
Oh, man. Yeah, you're on Twitter, aren't you?
Everything is nuanced, but yeah, Twitter's not nuanced a lot of absolutely. And and that is shit. And that's why I wouldn't criticize Luxon or people like that for looking like a thumb, because that's about what he looks like. And that
so
is
what's
not
the difference between criticizing for him that and making a joke about it? So where does that line fall then?
Like that was inappropriate, but I still was entertained by it because my husband did this thing once. He was all the leaders of the National Party, and it was just his hand. But yeah, that's not appropriate. But David Seymour drives me crazy, but I wouldn't say that he looks like Rimmer. No, yeah. But anyway, I'm undermining my arguments. But like to criticize somebody and mock them for a certain thing because of how they look is not conducive to any good political discourse. The thing is, it's tricky too, right? He said that Jacinda Ardern was the first Instagram prime minister, which drove me crazy because he went on fucking Dancing with the Stars. But the thing about seriously, but when you want to appeal to the general populace, you use all mediums that the general populace uses. Not everyone listens to Radio New Zealand. Not everyone listens to Big Hairy News. Some people like to see Instagram. I know, right? It's amazing. So yeah, you're using every aspect of communication with the public, and then to be criticized for that by somebody that went on Dancing with the Stars. But I won't criticize the way he looks as a response to that. I'll just say his argument is flawed.
You must be unique amongst the comedian world then. because that's not how most comedians operate. That they'll
Yeah,
only
Penny-
go after policy.
Penny, are you talking about having a conversation about policy, having a serious, sober discourse? Obviously, you're not going to talk about someone's appearance, right? But if you're in a different sort of field and you're hanging out with mates, and a politician you fucking hate looks a bit funny looking, come on,
Yeah.
you gotta like.
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? It's so true, but like the jokes that my husband and I would make at home sometimes, I'd be horrified if they were out there.
Right.
And I think you just have to be careful about what you put out in public because it can get to people.
I don't reckon. See, I reckon that's respectfully where maybe you're being a little bit naive now, because we all know examples publicly of people saying, "Have you ever said? Have you ever done? Have you ever tweeted from when you were 17?" And then being held account about. And this is kind of what I'm trying to delve into with this whole conversation. Like, George, you say you can be whatever word you use, critical of a politician without being misogynistic. But see, there are a sector of society which would disagree with you.
And I don't agree. I don't agree with them. And I think historical stuff is bullshit, the way that's, if you find some tweet from 1994 and use that to cancel someone, that's ridiculous. Some of my material 20 years ago, I look at and I'm horrified by some of the words that I used and context. And if that got out now in a public sphere about what I was saying then, that is shit. That is shit.
The classic example, and not that we're talking about this, and I think most of us would almost agree straight away, was like with the N word, for example. If you've ever said it at any stage, but let's stay on the topic we're going. Like, have you ever called Jacinda Ardern a cunt? And you'd said it amongst your friends whilst drinking for some reason for a laugh, and then you said, "Yeah, I did it behind closed doors." Then, in some sectors, you're going to get the same vitriol and attack that if you did do it publicly. So I guess what I'm trying to investigate and delve into in part of this conversation is, how do we do it in society now and actually
not
figure it out?
Just don't do it that way.
Yeah.
Well,
don't disagree with that sector of society that you're talking about, and just
and think
the other way.
Such an effort to not be personal about anybody, which, like Christopher Luxon saying, "I'm surprised she knows how to wear gumboots properly." She doesn't say anything like that about anybody. Like, she's risen, but I think she's remarkable that she's managed to keep things so not personal, whereas other politicians haven't done that.
And look, Gareth has just dragged us out of this conversation inadvertently, and let's say what Gareth, because he's going to allow us to talk about the next thing for 5 minutes before we go. Taking the high road is always the toughest option, but always the best. No need to insult people or abuse people. Just look at Will Smith, discuss the issue, not the person, eh? Now, the reason that's enabled us to be dragged out of this conversation is
Brian Edwards sounding off like some weirdo.
I'll have to disagree with Gareth another day.
Okay, I think Penny.
Sorry, Pat. Can I just say that I have?
Yeah.
I'm going to leave now. So,
goodbye.
I'm really sorry, but I have to go to work. I'm sorry. But I just wanted to say goodbye to you guys. Otherwise, I would have just left. But yeah.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Right.
Thanks, Penny. See you.
Thanks,
I mean, I just called him a weirdo, which is, against, but I just find this so crazy.
I think Brian Edwards probably, I've interacted with him numerous times. I don't know if you have, but certainly I think someone that feel free to disagree with me, but probably both of us have looked up to at some point and kind of revered on some level as a pretty amazing personal and commentator and writer and journalist and various bits and pieces. So Brian Edwards, what was the 10th? So it was 2 days ago on his Facebook page, talked about how to make a convincing public apology. I'm not going to read through all of this now because we're a little bit over, so we're going to just move into the second part of it. But basically, he sets out, Brian Edwards does PR and communication and stuff now, and he works with politicians and various groups about their public persona and how to sell yourself. So that's sort of one of the things he does. So he's got some thoughts around a public apology, how to do it. It's based in the conversation, or the thing that happened, I should say, with Will Smith. And it's fine. There's nothing in there untoward. There's nothing that's bad. It's a bit long and waffly, but he's basically talking about how to make a convincing public apology. Now, the thing that people are reacting to are then within minutes of that happening.
Dunedin dog.
Yeah, my Instagrams. This came after, so this was a day later, I guess, because that's 23 hours later. He also came up to say, I forgot to say, I forgot to say in previous posts that I thoroughly approved of Will Smith slapping Chris Rock for the joke he made about Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett's alopecia. My defense is that in all forms of human communication, there are lines that any sensitive or, for that matter, sensible person crosses at their own, peril. This was one such occasion. Rock got what he deserved. I'd say he got off lightly. Now, when I read this, my first thought was, where's the punchline? Brian Edwards is making a joke. Or has he had a grandson or someone come in to take the piss and actually put this up? It's so, in my opinion, off the mark and out of character and away from what Brian Edwards was. Maybe tomorrow we'll have to do a retraction because we'll find out that it was, a cheeky nephew or something.
Maybe it's been cloned.
Maybe he's been cloned. But the thing that's interesting is you also get a bunch of people couldn't agree with you more. I agree, Brian. He was defending his wife's honor just as he was programmed to do so. I mean, maybe he's gaslighting people to see amongst his followers who would think that, but it seems so out of kilter. And then this is the one that this is my reaction. Oh my God, I'm so disappointed to read this. I thought much more of you. Why would Chris Rock know that Smith had alopecia? He didn't make a joke about that just to a buzz cut. I'm truly shocked that you think it's okay for a man to walk up and strike another person just because he didn't like what he heard. I would ask you to go back and listen to a few of the things Smith has said in the past. Now, no, let's not. Let's go around slapping each other in the face. Disgraceful. And I mean, I don't know if they're the exact words I'd use, but honestly, I still kind of feel like maybe tomorrow there'll be a he's put out a statement to say his cheeky nephew got on to stir up some trouble, because it just feels so off to me that this is what Brian Edwards would say.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but I just think it's so very wrong. It's like it just beggars belief. He said things on national radio quite a lot that people would disagree with, I'm sure. He was always on with Michelle Bogue. He and Michelle Bogue were the first two panelists together. Surely she said things that, and she's done some reprehensible things lately, that he would have disagreed with. She'd just reach across and slap her. Do you know? It's just so astonishing to me. And we don't know that Chris Rock knew that she had alopecia. Words are always much more important than slapping. He got what he deserved. It's like, what? So weird.
I just refreshed the page just in case this was already taken down, but it's still there.
Are you very sad, are you? This is like an icon that's fallen slightly in your eyes.
I mean, gosh, I've got to be careful what words we pick, but Brian's getting a lot older. Maybe this was an elderly moment.
Yeah, we don't want to bring ageism into it, though. That's the thing.
But why? I mean, Brian Edwards has been a left-wing icon for 30, 40 years. Yeah. And I would think if you said to Brian over a beer, if you said something to offend me or my partner, could I smack you in the face? He'd say no. So that's why I just don't, because that's what a sane and normal human being would say, that you don't respond violently to a offensive statement. And I actually don't understand this from Brian Edwards, which is why it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but to leap to his age is the same as asking a woman if she wants to, you know what I mean? It's
that's why I didn't. That's why I said I wouldn't say. It's like, but there's got to be a reason for this, and that's what I'm saying. What could the reason be? Occam's razor talks about the fewest number of assumptions to get to a conclusion, and at the moment, I'm kind of going, he hasn't written this. He can't have written this. Surely, a left-wing icon saying that violence is fine against words, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yep. Oh well, we watch this space perhaps.
Yeah, maybe I'm the only person that'll be saying it's a mistake.
It's funny, right? I don't know, because I only started listening to national radio when I moved back from England. So and when they asked me to be on it was when I started listening to it. So it was like mid 2000, the first 2000. So he was sort of gone by then, I think. So it's funny, he's not been somebody that I have revered to the same extent as you, I think. So this is interesting, the different reactions to this.
I just revere him in the way that of what he's, I mean, he started, he was one of the first guys on, what's it called? Fair Go. He's been around forever. And also, I respect him from what he's done in the political world as well. He's been an advisor and stuff to prime ministers and a high figure. So he's been giving advice, right? That's his job, to give advice. To see this advice, if they offend you, smack them one. That doesn't seem to be
And it's like, I guess he's saying that this is acceptable behavior from actors, but would he say that Jacinda should go and slap someone in the face when they call her a pretty communist or something? You know what I mean? Like it is extremely weird.
I mean, what the example you just gave about him and Michelle Bogue is a bit different, I think, because I don't think at any stage Michelle Bogue would have massively offended him to require, because what he's saying is if you're
of course she would. They would fight.
But personally offended or just more politically,
yeah. Yeah, she probably wouldn't make a joke about his wife, let's be honest.
Yeah. But either way, to hear someone talking about, to someone of his standing, to talk about the way to I approve that the way to respond to this offensive joke is to hit this person in the face, to assault them. That's what I'm shocked by.
Yeah, me too.
All right. I look forward to, I don't think if this is what he believes, I don't think there's going to be a retraction.
No.
But perhaps we will find out that some cheeky great nephew or nephew put this on his thing and he hasn't, I'm sure he would have caught up with it, but now, I mean, it's had hundreds of views and, and hundreds of comments. So it's been shared and so I'm sure he would have seen it by now if that was the case. So that's not looking likely either.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hey, thanks, Penny. I really enjoyed today and I really appreciate your perspective on that first topic. I mean, I'm always up for being educated and I have been educated today purely, if nothing else, that idea of like, so you understand, and so others understand, my dyslexia, one of the things that happens with my dyslexia is sometimes the written word and the spoken word go in very differently. So I'll give you an example if you've got a minute. I used to get a message from my accountant saying, okay, we need these things in 3 months, to give me a list of things. And then I wouldn't do it. I'd read it and go, what the fuck are those? And wouldn't do anything about it. And then, 2 months later, I would go, hey, just a reminder, in a month, we need these things. And I'd read it and go, what? I don't want those fucking are, and I'd ignore it. Then 2 weeks later, I'd get another email. And then a week later, I'd get another email saying, we need these by the end of the week. And I'd read it and I go, I don't know what the fuck those are. And then I'd call a friend who works in accounts and she'd come around and she'd go, right, print me out the email. And so I'd print out the email and hand it to her and she'd read it to me. And I go, oh, yeah, I know how to do that. There was something about how the written word wouldn't go in, but the spoken word would. That's a part of so maybe I'm different, that when I am asking questions and going, can you explain this to me? It's because I fucking need it explained to me a bit more so than going in. So when Michelle said today, which is the dictionary definition, but when she said hatred because they're women, that actually makes a difference to me. And you might all think, what a fucking moron. Look at that idiot. That's what the definition is. But there was a difference in my brain, how my synapses fire, hearing that and going, oh yeah, so hatred towards John Key was never because he was a man, but there is hatred towards, it doesn't close the conversation for me, but it brings a perspective to me that I understand more purely by that sentence being said. And that's why we're asking the questions.
But also it's about the volume too, right? So John Key got hate, but the volume is so much more. Like, I love that Dr. Bloomfield said that. He was like, yes, I've gotten a lot of hate, but it's nothing compared to the women around me that have gotten. And that's it. Like Judine, she's the deputy mayor of Nelson, gets way more hatred. And the mayor probably does too, because she's a woman as well. Then other councillors and things like that. So it's about the volume and it's about the vitriol. And it's in all levels. And it really worries. Exactly, Blast. And it really worries me that it'll put women off going in to be represented in Parliament, because we need representation of all people and races, etc., and ages, to be honest. They keep shuffling people off because they get too old. That's bullshit too. So, yeah.
I feel like, based on today's conversation, I should give you the last word. Why don't you rap for us, Penny? I'm going to turn my mic off. You can rap for us today as a symbol of unity and love between people. And then we'll catch everyone else tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. You want to leave with anything?
I will just say, reflect on the women in your life, about the fact that they people the world. Women make the world. I'm really got this thing now about our reproductive system is the thing that's been so often used against us and it's the thing that keeps the world going. So reflect on that. Give women the respect they deserve. It's about equality. That's what we're looking for. And stop discouraging people in the public eye. I also think people get so much hatred. Politicians get so much hatred, and they're just trying to often run the world in a way that they think is best. But anyway, enough of that. I've been Penny Ashton, Pat Brittenden. This has been Big Hairy News on every day. Lots of different people discussing lots of different news, and we'll see. Well, he'll see you tomorrow because I won't be here. Bye, ka kite.
Bye.